Good day, everyone, and welcome to Going for Gold, How to Create an Award-Winning Gold Quill Case Study. I'm Michelle Liston, IABC's Gold Quill Manager, and today we are happy to welcome over 400 of you from around the world. Before we get started, just a few notes. All attendees will be muted during the webinar, so if you have a question, please enter it in the chat functionality on the right of your screen, and we'll get to it as soon as possible. We will be answering questions throughout the webinar. We will also be posting a final copy of the slideshow on the Gold Quill website at gq.iabc.com at the conclusion of the webinar. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to your presenter today, Ed Cameron, SCMP, IABC Awards Committee Chair. Ed focuses on communications that mobilize people to make a positive impact at their workplaces, in their communities, and in their lives. Over the past 2 decades, he has worked with organizations ranging from early-stage startups to Fortune 5 companies, and he currently leads communications for corporate responsibility at the McKesson Corporation. An IABC member since 2007, Ed has served the association as the San Francisco Chapter President, Pacific Plains Region Chair, and the inaugural chair of the IABC Foundation Grant Selection Task Force, in addition to his current role as the Awards Committee Chair. He has evaluated international, regional, and local awards for more than 10 years. Ed, take it away.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Welcome, everybody. As Michelle mentioned, I've evaluated awards for more than a decade. And so today, what I'd like to do is talk through our Gold Quill Awards, to tell you more about them. Pardon me, I'm just working on advancing the slide. We're looking at what the Gold Quill Awards are, what the division and categories are. We're looking at some special awards that we give as well. We'll be looking at the strategic framework. We will also be looking at how we evaluate and who evaluates, and finally some tips on how to enter. Throughout, I'll be focusing on tips to make your award better, to help you score the highest. Really sharing the secrets I've learned over the years of evaluating. As Michelle mentioned, we love questions. Please do bring your questions up in the chat box. We'll be answering them throughout. If we can't answer any today, we'll get back to you and answer them later. Just a little bit about who we are more broadly. As Michelle mentioned, I'm the Awards Committee Chair. Our committee consists of a number of IBC members. I've listed them all here. What I'd love to emphasize here is that they're from around the world. Daniel's from Australia, Neil from the UK, Maureen from Canada, Gabby from the US, and Ritzy from the Philippines. We really do look at this as a global program in every way, and that extends to our committee. We're also lucky to have Michelle, who introduced me. Michelle is an IBC staff member. She's a professional awards manager who really leads the way for us. And I would be remiss in not thanking Monica Lansutsky, ABC. Monica actually created much of this presentation, and she delivered it last week to Western Australia for a Gold Quill event. So Monica, thank you very much for sharing your great presentation and all your insights. One thing I'd love to emphasize again about Gold Quills is a global awards program. We've been around for more than 40 years, and we get entries from all around the world, not just the English-speaking world, from other countries as well. We do accept entries in English, French, and Spanish. And just as the entries come from all over the world and the committee is from all over the world, the evaluators are also from all over the world. And that's important. Your entry very likely will be evaluated by someone around the world from you. And that's just a good thing to think about, as we'll see when you create your entry. They'll be coming to someone who may not share your cultural context. We have a number of categories. We actually reduced the number this year to make it easier to enter, but we didn't take away any of the richness of them. So there are 4 categories. The ones we see the most is communication management. That's really looking at campaigns, the management of a campaign, and we weight that equally between the campaign management itself and the work sample. Another big division is skills. Those are things like writing, annual reports, special events, digital communication, video series, examples of your skill as a communicator. 2 other divisions are the research division. That's looking at the formative research we do early in our projects as a way to build research that is so important to our profession. And finally, we love to hear about communication training and education, how you train communication professionals and non-communication professionals to help advance understanding of what we do and our profession, its techniques, and what it has to offer. This year, we took away the student categories, but that doesn't mean we're not rolling out the welcome mat to students. Students can now actually enter all of the categories. We don't have special categories, but we do have special fees. Recognizing that students will have more limited means, we offer them significant discounts. If you're a student, your fee could be as low as $25. If you're a student member, meet the early bird. Those go up to about $100. This year, we're also designating evaluators, people who already work with students, and that's designed to have someone, an educator, someone who's a communication professor, look at your entry, someone who understands your context as a student, but also a strategic communicator who can evaluate, based on the high standards of our profession. We're also really excited to unroll a new category this year. Diversity inclusion is a big topic, not just in communication, but really throughout organizations. We've heard about wonderful work being done in that area, and the committee this year wanted to introduce a category specific to that. Diversity inclusion really welcomes entries that seek to create more diverse and inclusive organizations and societies. I'll pause here and just ask if there are any questions right out of the gate.
Nothing right now.
All right, if that being so, I'll keep on going. We do offer a number of special awards. Those are specific to certain categories. So best of the best, those are the ones that are the very top of each of the categories. Business issues and research are what they sound like. They're entries that focus specifically on how communication helped address a business issue or a research project. We also have a student award, and we look at department and nonprofit departments of the year. Also, if you're from an agency, you might want to look at the agency of the year of the awards. Those are grouped by the size of your agency, and they're based on the number of Gold Quill awards that you get. All of those awards, along with all the other Gold Quill awards, are given out at the World Conference, which will be in June of next year in Chicago. Going from the framework, now we're going to move into creating an entry. And I'm going to start communication management because it is, in some ways, the most complex. This is the same framework that we use for research and for education. So they'll all look very similar. And the insights that you get here will help you with your communication skills entry as well. So this is really the framework for strategic communication that Gold Quill sets out. I'll be going to each of these in detail, but the tombstone, though it might sound morbid, is really the little introduction that says what your category is, who you are, what category you're entering, the name of your project. We go into it and a description of it. But then the real meat of it is the business need and opportunity, talk about why your organization did this project, the stakeholder analysis, looking deeply at your audiences, the goals and objectives. We'll talk a bit about the difference between those two things. The solution overview, how you carried out your project, implementation and challenges, that includes the resources available to you, how you put your project into practice, and any challenges you met along the way, and finally, your evaluation. The first section, business need. So what I see here a lot over the years in entries, people will cut and paste their company description. That's a good start here, but that's not exactly what we're looking for. We do need to know what your company does. As I mentioned earlier, your evaluator could be from around the world. They may not know your industry. But what we really want to know here is, why did you do this project? Why did this land in your inbox on your desk? Well, how does it benefit the organization? Why does it matter now? Out of all the things that you or your organization could possibly be doing right now in communication, and I'm sure there are lots, why did you invest in this project? What was it? Why did it matter? And how is it going to help your business? Another tip here is, if you have any research, that's awesome. It could be formal or informal. It could be something like, are you facing a recession in your country? Are you facing reputation challenges? Are your employee opinion scores not where you want them to be? Any kind of data that comes in with that is great because it helps us understand how you substantiate the project, why you're investing in it now. So really the big question here is, why this project? Why now? Stakeholder analysis is the next section. And here we're talking about, of course, your audience. We want to know what you know about your audience. And that could be age, that could be education data. It could also be their attitudes, their preferences about how they get communications, what channels they like. It could be their demographics. Like I mentioned, population data, sex, gender. It could also be their psychographics, their belief systems, their attitudes, and any research you might have done to get that information. That could be, if you're internal communications, that could be for your HR department, employee data that they might have segmented. If you're external, that could be marketing data. It could be stuff you get from social media that helps you understand who your audiences are. But however you get that data, a couple of big tips. The first one is to really segment your audience. General public isn't a great answer here. We're looking for you to segment, to show you so you understand your audience. Who's the primary audience here? Of all the people you could target, who did you target? Why these people? You can have primary and secondary audiences. Most people do, in fact. The better you can define them, the better you're likely to score. And research can be scary. Sometimes we don't have ready access to that data. You might be a consultant and not be able to directly access your client's data, for example. In that case, it can really help to reach out to HR and marketing. Form those partnerships. That data is out there. It might not be readily available to you, but now is a great time to start gathering it. So goals and objectives, this is an area we see a lot of questions on. There is a lot of resources on our website, so I won't go into deep detail, but the goal is the very high level purpose of your project. Your goal might be to increase employee retention. It might be to grow market share. It might be to be perceived as the #1 solution provider in your industry. It's the big overarching purpose of your project. It's what it fits under. It's, if you think of what a CEO will be looking at, it's that kind of level of how does this contribute to what the enterprise is trying to accomplish. Really big picture. The objectives is where we start looking about how communications helps meet that goal. There are a bunch of different ways you can look at that. One is the outputs. That's familiar to a lot of us. Things like, how many posts did you post? What was your reach? Did you grow your followers? How many stories did you publish? How many media placements did you get? Those kind of communication metrics that we use. Another valid, what I often hear is, my project's real goal, it wasn't to get, to achieve, say, additional profit. It wasn't dollars and cents, it was to change attitudes. We can have objectives around outtakes. That often gets measured by survey or focus groups. That could be better understanding of an idea, better understanding of a program, getting an audience to embrace a position, or changing attitudes. And finally, outcomes are the business outcomes, actual behavior that happens, getting people to buy a product, to sign up for a program, to drive more safely. Those outcomes are important because they tend to lead directly to the business bottom line. And so we like to see, not all projects will have outtakes or outputs, but we do outcomes we'd love to see. And really whatever combination of these three makes sense for your project. I'll pause again and just check if there are any questions.
Thanks, Ed. We did actually have one question that I thought might be helpful for some folks. This person was interested in understanding a little bit more about what the differences are between, or if there are differences, between submitting on behalf of your own company, or if you are a consultant or agency who is submitting on behalf of a client.
So glad you asked. We welcome either way. If you are submitting on behalf of your agency, then we need a client permission letter. There's a template for that on gq.ibc.com, the Gold Quill website. But we welcome, you can either submit as, on behalf of your client, as long as you've gotten permission, or you can submit for your own organization. Great. I'll go on with objectives. Continuing on is the SMART formula is something that I see a lot of nods on when I talk about it, but we don't always see that in the entries. It's a very good idea to state your objectives in SMART format. I won't be exhaustive on that, but to recap what SMART is, we're looking for a specific objective, something that's, for example, is observable, something you can see. That could be an increase in reach numbers, say, an increase in number of posts, and a survey result. Measurable, we do prefer quantitative, measurable objectives. We realize they aren't always, but the more measurable they are, the easier they are to see what you actually achieved. I like to think of that as when I communicate up to my VP, they tend to want to see quantifiable results. If it's something like a publication, sometimes that can be a little trickier to think, what's a measurable result? In that case, the measurable result could be, there could be a process metric by like how quickly you got it done, or it could be a readership. How much did you grow readership for your publication? It could be a feedback survey. But whatever type of project you have, we want it to be measurable. We also want it to be attainable. We're not trying to trip you up by setting overly ambitious goals and objectives. One great way to do that is to benchmark, to look at perhaps your past performance, how much you're able to improve things in past years, or if it's a new project, can you look to an industry standard? Can you look to peer standard to help you set your objective so it's ambitious but not out of reach? It needs to be relevant, something that relates to your project, and it needs to be time-based. When do you need to achieve this by? I often see this missing from entries. So say, I want to increase readership of my publication by 20% by December 2019, from January 2019 to December 2019. Those kind of parameters. If you can tick off all 5 of those for your objective, you're going to have a strong objective and you're going to score well. Moving into the solution overview.
Oh, Ed, before you move on with that, we did have another question about objectives. So if you have both communication and business objectives, should you add both, or is there one that's considered more important than the other for the purposes of the entry?
We'd love to see both. If you have both, that's really wonderful, because that shows us you're looking from the lens of a communicator, what your specific measurements are, but you're also looking at the impact on the business. So both and is a wonderful thing. Any other questions before I move on?
We have one more question about a government submission.
Yeah.
As a government organization, our campaign goals are to introduce new programs and initiatives. Our measurements would be impressions and metrics achieved after the campaign completion. Is that acceptable?
That sure is. Yeah, impressions are something we see a lot of in media. Impressions, reach, those kinds of metrics we do see a lot of. And as long as, one thing to remember for all of these, and I'm going to get to this later, but often we'll see like results at the end, but we won't see them in the objective section. So we want to make sure before you even start your campaign, how many impressions were you seeking? What was your goal? So that's an important one. Something I also wanted to drive home today is, if you're in the middle of your campaign and you didn't set quantitative objectives, you can still do it in the middle. If you got into your project and you realized you hadn't done that, you can still do that. Just be straightforward about that and explain that you added those mid-campaign. But to have that objective and then measure performance against it makes your entry very strong. Anything else before I continue on to solution? If not, I'll keep on going. For the solution overview, this is about really how you carry out your project, how you put it into practice, how you implemented it. And here it can be really helpful to do a table or chart that talks about the stages of your project. It can be a lot to go through. We know it's hard to summarize a complex project, but make sure we do understand how you put into play, who was involved, the steps you took, what were the channels you used. Here's also where we want to see your key messages, and be sure to state those outright. I often see those missing, and it's simple to just number them out. Give us your key messages. We're looking for a couple. 3 is a good number here, 2 to 3. It can be even less, but to make sure that you do articulate those. And if you had to make some trade-offs, or if you had to change course midstream, that's fine. Explain to us how you did that. We love to see how you think. A lot of the Gold Quill communication management and the related divisions are about how you think as a communicator, how you approach a project. So if you change midstream, no problem. Just let us know and tell us how you changed course why and how it worked. Going into the implementation challenges, this is part where we do talk specifically about, did you hit any tough parts around here? Did anything not go as planned? At least my experience over 20 years is that things usually will not go completely as planned. That we want to know how you worked with that. How did you think around that? How did you get creative or inventive? How do you manage a project? And how did you collaborate? Who did you work with? We don't usually work in isolation as communicators. We're working with other departments, other agencies, other organizations. Highlight that. Even though it's your entry, we want to know how you work together. How did you leverage shared resources to get the job done? This is really the inside story. And frankly, as an evaluator, this could be the part that's the most fun to read. It's really sharing what went well, what didn't go well, and how did you work around that? How did you get back on track? And the resource discussion brings up something that can be a hot potato of Gold Quill. I wanted to address it straight on. We do require budget. I will often see that missing. It doesn't show up at all. And there's a reason for that. We're not trying to grab intel. We're not trying to get market data. What we want to understand is what the resources were, what you had available to you, and what you did with it. I'll give you an example. Last year, I evaluated 6 Gold Quill entries. One had a $5 million budget. Another one had a $1,000 budget. They actually both got excellence. They're both fantastic entries. But I looked at them differently. In both cases, though, is how did they use their resources? For a $1,000 budget, I don't necessarily expect the same level of polish, but inventiveness, creativity, resourcefulness, those things can come out, and that entry really did. For the $5 million budget, good on you that you had a huge budget. We're not docking you for that. That's positive. We are curious, how did you spend that budget? How did you get the most impact? In the case of those entries, both showed me that they used the resources really well, really wisely, and they got great results. Sometimes we know that there might be a client who just refuses to give budget. We do strongly prefer budget, but if you can't get budget, there are workarounds. Tell us about how many hours you spent. Tell us about your resources. Tell us about how you might price it for another client. Anything that gets us an understanding of what the resource you have, so it's fair. So we compare your resources, what you had available to you, and what you achieved. It's more fair for everybody. I sometimes see that, well, the budget was zero because the project was pro bono. To me and to other evaluators, that's not convincing because we want to know how you valued your time. Your time matters a lot. You're a skilled communication professional. Tell us how much you feel what would you price the project on the open market? What if it was for a client? Let us know the equivalent there. So again, budget can be contentious, but it is important, and it's important because it lets us know what you had to work with and how you deployed it.
Ed, we do have a couple of questions about budget.
Of course.
One attendee wants to know, when sharing the budget information in your entry, is this confidential? And when it's being reviewed by the judging committee?
I'm really glad that question came up. Yes, it is confidential. We are expected to abstain from judging entries from competitors. And the fact that it's international is a nice safeguard. Your evaluator will be from around the world, so it's unlikely that it's going to be a direct competitor who's going to see it. But so we have all those safeguards, but above all, confidentiality is paramount.
And then the next question is, at what point in the submission should we discuss budget?
Yeah, it should be part of section 5. So it will be when you go through the guides. We ask for that in section 5, and you can give a total number. You can also give. It can be impressive if you give the breakout if that's available to you. You know what percentage went to different areas. That can be great. For example, what was materials? What was a big buy? And Why did you invest where you did? That can be really compelling too. We decided to spend a lot on this. Say we started to spend, sorry, I'm getting tripped up. We decided to spend a lot on a huge splashy special event because it was important to our launch. That could be great. Just explain us, how much you spent and why you made that decision. Any other questions? I know that budget resources are a category where a lot does come up. If not, I'll keep on going into measurement evaluation. We talked about that earlier. What I see a lot of is we get results in the measurement section that didn't come up in the objectives, and they should track. This is where you're measuring how well you achieved your objectives. So they should correspond one-to-one. This is really where how did you do? Sometimes people ask, what if I didn't hit all my objectives? Can I win if I didn't hit them all? And the answer is yes, you can. We're not looking for perfection here. We're looking for smart strategic thinking and good results. Maybe you, despite your best efforts, you set an overly ambitious one. Or maybe your business made a decision that made it possible for you to continue along one of those objectives. Just explain that to us. I often also see here like nice words, quotes from stakeholders. And that's wonderful, but that's not likely to get you a lot of points. So testimonials those can be wonderful within your organization, it's great to see, but what we're really looking for is measurement against objectives. And something I rarely see, but will get you extra points, is what did you learn from this? What kind of insights did you get from the results? If it's a repeating campaign, like an annual report, an annual enrollment campaign, what would you do differently next time? Or what would you do the same based on your evaluation? Even a sentence or two is great because it shows us that you're taking that measurement as a way to learn, to get better, to hone your skills as a department, as a communicator. Any questions? Not, I'll keep on going.
Actually, we do have one that just came in.
Please.
So if measurement should match one-to-one versus objectives, what about reporting unexpected results?
That's fine, but just go ahead and add that in and just mention that it is an unexpected result. If you do that in addition to your results that track, that's great. Just don't do it instead, if that makes sense. So we want to see how you measured each of your objectives. But if something late-breaking data came in, something unexpected, do share that. We certainly won't count it against you. Just don't replace that tracked, one-to-one objective and measurement. And this slide is the kind of the required limits. It is hard to stick to 4 pages. We understand it does take editing, but please don't, tiny font is really hard for your evaluator to read, keep margins and so forth. The biggest point to emphasize here is sometimes we see giant work samples. People show us everything they did for a project. That's really hard to go through as an evaluator. That doesn't always help. In fact, it usually hurts to have too much to go through. The magic word here is curation. Be sure to curate your work samples. We want to see an example of what you did. The exception could be, say, in the communication skills. Say you had a report. You'll typically want to include your full report. We understand that. But say if you did a social media campaign, we don't want to see every post you did. A representative sampling is a good thing here. Or if you did a campaign to increase adoption of a city service, you could include a poster, you could include maybe a video outtake from a conference or a meeting. But small samples that shows what you do, they're illustrative, are what we're looking for here, not a documentation of everything you did for the project. The skills division, we just want to talk about briefly because this is the other, along with communication management, this is where we get the bulk of our entries. This year we made our questions more specific. We want to make sure that you had what you need to do to answer them effectively. And you can see they're not that different from the communication management. The difference is that we have character limits in the skills division So we're going to be looking for something briefer here. So, and in this skills division, as I'll go on to show you, this section counts for 1/3 versus half as it does in communication management, training, and research. So again, looking at the organization, the business need, the audience, we ask in skills for up to 3 objectives and up to 3 messages. We do ask for resources in this division as well. And we ask, based on everything you learned about your need, audience, and so forth, how did you take that insight to, and leverage those to develop your project? And so when you do the skills division, you'll have an online form to fill out with those character limits. It's a little different from the other divisions where you'll be actually submitting a document that you'll format. Either way, whatever division you enter, here's some tips for a great work sample. Use up to 5 samples. 5 is the upper limit. And as I mentioned earlier, representative samples, not everything you did. One thing I saw last year a lot of is, sometimes with social media campaigns, folks would point us to their social media sites. And that's not in the spirit of Gold Quill. Your entry does need to be self-contained. So we're looking for you to include samples of, say, your Facebook posts, your Instagram posts, your tweets. Within that, don't point people elsewhere. Sometimes we also see that in the section where they're asked for your implementation, people say, look at my implementation plan, which is pages and pages of a Gantt chart. Again, that's not in the spirit of what we're looking. In that work plan, you need to keep that in the 4 pages. You can't point elsewhere to the work sample to answer the question. The work sample is separate. And make it easy for the evaluator. One way you can do that is by naming files and labeling them. Make it really clear. And my 2 tips, one is, as I mentioned earlier, curate, curate, curate. We want to see examples, your best examples. Show us the best you got. And another tip, again, that I see a lot, is it builds on the work plan. It needs to reflect the audiences you have. It needs to contribute to the objectives. It all needs to hang together and follow logically. That will make your entry score really, really well, and that is the spirit of Gold Quill. Any questions here?
I have one question on the work plan. Regarding the work plan, do we embed a video right into the work plan? Usually they are posted on YouTube.
That's a great question. You can go ahead and that would actually be in the work sample. You wouldn't include video in your work plan, but in the work sample, you can include a hyperlink to YouTube. That okay, or you can embed it within like a Vimeo. We do realize that you can also embed a video directly in, but I understand that there can be problems with file sizes and uploading to the server. So that's a great question. Yes, in that case, you can use a link and point to it, especially if the video file size is prohibitive. We also see Vimeo and so forth. Unfortunately, we do also every year see people who send dead links. So make sure your link to the video hasn't expired. And remember that if you submit now, your entry will be evaluated in February or March of next year. So be careful of those expiring links because they will hurt your entry.
And I was just going to say exactly the same thing. We had another question about if we submit a video, how do we include it? If it's not pointing to a file sharing site, usually the videos would be too large to send via email. Yes, you can do it either way. We do have fairly large file size limits in the work sample area. So you can submit it directly, just download the file. If that does not work, you can do a PDF or a Word document with a link to the video, either on YouTube or on some other file sharing site. But as Ed just mentioned, please be sure that during the evaluation period, February and March, that those links are live and that there are no passwords required, or if there are passwords required to be able to view them, that you do include that on that document. The key is to make it very easily accessible for the evaluators.
And one other thing I'd add on videos, remember length too. I recently got an entry that had a 50-minute video. We're not able to go through a 50-minute video in the course of evaluation. Think of your evaluator spending about an hour on your entry. So it's a good idea to curate here too, or pick short videos, or maybe point to the part of the video that you would like the evaluator to look at.
We also had another just general question that I've gotten a few. Questions. Do you have to be an IABC member in order to submit a nomination, to
I'm
submit
so
an
sorry I
entry?
missed that. No, and I apologize for missing that. Nope, all are welcome to enter the Gold Quill program. It's open to both members and non-members. If you're a member, a benefit is that you have lower entry fees, but we welcome non-members. And by the way, I'll get to this later, but we're publishing tips and tricks on the IABC, International Association of Business Communicators Facebook group, which is open to all. So if you haven't joined that, you're a non-member, make sure to join so you can get some of those good tips. Any other questions before I go on? Not, I'll just go, and I know I'm going on about this, but just really, again, the long samples, they can hurt your entry. And so think about, if it's a long document, maybe just include part of it. And remember that it's self-contained. Don't expect people to go elsewhere with the exception of video links we just mentioned. And again, think about your evaluator, about spending like an hour going through. And by the way, there are 2 evaluators going through that. So altogether, it's very typical to spend 3 hours going through an entry. We pay a lot of attention to them, but please make our task as easy as it can be so we can focus on the substance of the entry, what's saying, and not trying to find the work in there. So I keep talking about valuation, so now we've gotten there. I want to just talk through our scale real quickly. So we have 4 divisions. 1 to 3 are the ones that have the long work plans. That's the management, education, training, and research. Those are scored half work plan, half sample. Communication skills is a little different. Here we do basic work in thirds. 1/3 is the creativity and resourcefulness. 1/3 is how it aligns, strategic alignment, and that's to objectives, to audience, to the business need. And 1/3 is professional standards of execution, how well you executed, high quality design, writing, video work, event planning. And we use a 7-point scale. 4 is fully competent. That's a good thing to remember. We're looking for award-winning. We're not, so even the cutoffs are ambitious, but they're doable. For merit, it's 5.25 to just under 5.75. Excellence is 5.75. And if you've entered other IBC awards like silver and bronze quills, we all use the same scale, but the cutoffs can be a little bit different. They're very slightly different for silver and bronze. So, but if you did enter those, we strongly urge you to re-enter in Gold Quill. The feedback you get from your silver and bronze quill can be invaluable in making your Gold Quill entry sing. And they're wonderful programs of their own right. I reference a 7-point scale. Don't think about this if you're saying the US is an ABCD. This is not how this works. 7 is extraordinary, and we mean it. 7 is, I haven't seen a lot of 7s in my time. That's a really extraordinary career-making campaign. Even our best of the best typically score in the 6s. I don't think I've ever seen all 7s. A 4 is fully competent. It's fully sound. A 4 is good work. But then we go up from a 5. That's where we're seeing that real strategic thinking, that real alignment. The 6, we're starting to see the innovation. And 7, again, is just mic drop, as they say. It's something really extraordinary, unusual, advances our profession. Going to the other end, I would say at the Gold Quill, I rarely see 1s or 2s. But we do see some 3s, and that's when elements are missing. If you follow the guidelines, you'll have it all there, but that's where you can run into trouble if something important is missing. And 2, of course, if we're missing a lot. And 1, which I have not seen yet in my 10 years, is something that's completely wrong. Any questions on how we measurement or the scales?
Actually, Ed, we have another bigger picture question.
Yeah.
Can you enter a campaign that is still ongoing?
That's a great question. You have to have results. So if you have interim results that you can share, then you could go ahead and enter your campaign. Sometimes what we see is they're big, ginormous campaigns. And we get the question, can I enter part of it? And the answer is yes, absolutely. It could be a multi-year campaign, but maybe part of it is already done or is at a stopping point. If you have the measurement, then yeah, go ahead and do that. just note that this is, for this portion of the campaign. You can enter a phase of a campaign. That totally works. Again, just make sure you have all the pieces for your entry.
And we have another kind of general question. Are there submissions from organizations who scored well in the past that we can review as an example?
There sure are. We have a wealth of resources. It'll be on the last slide, but the website you want to go to is GQ for goldquill.iabc.com. We have guides, we have examples of past entries. We want you to see the work that's been done that's won awards. So we do have examples. We're happy to share those, and we add to those all the time.
And another question. I have judged in the past for Silverleaf Awards. One nomination was brilliant and well executed, but they didn't achieve their goals. Should we submit something if we miss our targets?
That's a great question. I think it comes down to, did you think were your targets too high? Or did something happen that was a great work that for something beyond your control, you just weren't able to meet them? If you felt like you set them too high and you could show that that was the case, but you still got good business results, I would go ahead and enter it. I'm also happy to talk about that more online. It sounds like that's a little bit complex, and I certainly don't want to give misdirection. At the end, we'll give contact information, and my Twitter handle is @EdCameron. I welcome direct messages, and you can also, I'd love to get that question sent to recognition@ibc.com, where I or another member of the committee can address it in more depth. I just want to make sure I guide you correctly. Anything else before I go on? Not, I'll continue on to the top 10 tips for success. And again, big thank you to Monica Lansutski from Australia, past Gold Quill chair, who came up with these top 10 tips. So I'll go through these fairly quickly so we can get to Q&A. I know our hour is going by quickly. One is pick the right project. And what do we mean by pick the right project? Here we're talking about, was it a project? Did you get was it an outstanding project? Is it something you feel particularly proud of? One thing to think about here is, did it matter? Did it make a big difference? Did it have the objectives? Did it have the strategy? Does it have all the pieces that we need for Gold Quill? And again, as we mentioned earlier, is it a huge project? Is it almost too big for Gold Quill? And if so, would we want to split it into parts? One thing to mention here is, I get this question all the time, can I enter in multiple categories? And the answer is yes, you can. You're welcome to do that. Sometimes people, for example, will have a campaign that was a government relations, government affairs campaign, but they also really did some stellar writing as part of that. You could enter in both the writing category and the government affairs. Often we see that human resources campaigns also overlap with employee communications. You can certainly enter both. You're welcome to enter multiple categories. Picking your timing. So we do get the question about how old can my entry be? For this year's, it needs to be after January 2017. It can be ongoing, but before January 2017. And we do get asked, can I re-enter if I didn't win? Yes, you can certainly re-enter. Go ahead and sharpen your entry based on the feedback you got and re-enter it. If it was after January 2017, please go ahead. But if you won in the past, you can't win for the same entry again. And that would be the same entry in the same category. Choose your category carefully. So we are here to help you. We've reduced the number, but even with 25 categories, that could be a lot to go through. Really think about what's the best category applies. We have descriptions, but I'd really welcome some back and forth on that. If you're not sure where your entry fits, email recognition@ibc.com or reach out to me or the committee. We can help you out with that. And again, multiple categories are welcome. Getting started early. Congratulations, you're all on this call, so you're well ahead of the deadlines. As you know, the first one's mid-October, but then most of the other are in January. To get started early, it will work out for you to get started early. Start a folder, start gathering things. There are a lot of pieces, and especially if it's new, if this is your first time for Gold Quill, you'll want more time than you think. I made that mistake the first time I entered Gold Quill. I started a couple weeks ahead. That wasn't enough time to get all the pieces I needed. If you start now, you'll be in great shape.
And also, Ed, don't forget to mention our marathon training program. You've got it on this slide. That's another great resource for helping you pace yourself as far as the development of your entry.
Yes, thank you for that plug, Michelle. We are excited about what we're calling Couch to Gold Quill. It's a series of posts on the IABC LinkedIn group that I mentioned earlier. And if you're an IABC member, you can find it on the hub. We'll be posting every week. We, being the members of the awards committee, will go through one section of your entry and give you tips and tricks on how to do that. So if you want to follow along, you could do it every week. I'm personally a runner. I do well with training plans. I found that helps me know what I need to do each week. It makes it more approachable. And then there's not that crazy making sprint at the end. So please take advantage of it. And what's nice about both those platforms is they allow for questions and comments. We're monitoring those. We want to hear from you. And more generally on Gold Quill, someone asked about, do we have past entries? We sure do. We'll have this presentation, and we share our score sheets. We're really transparent. You want to see what the judges are using, what the evaluators are using. We have them there so you can see them. And by the way, we have more than 200 evaluators from all over the world. They all go through training. We take this very seriously. We want them to all judge consistently. And that's where we have the rubrics to make sure that you're getting the same hearing. We have templates. We have a lot there. So please go ahead there, but also don't be shy about sharing your questions. Describe your audience well. That's something we touched on earlier. There's just so many ways you could do that. I often see charts, which are great, that look at who's this audience and what you know about them. Say if it's an employee audience, how are you dividing them up? Could it be office workers versus remote workers versus salespeople? Could it be if it's consumers? Are you going after Gen X? Are you going after men, Canadian men between 30 and 50? Whoever your audience is, share that with us. We don't know. We're from the outside looking in. And the better you describe your audience, the better we can assess how your materials met their needs, addressed them, met them where they were. Not to harp on this too much, but again, include SMART objectives. We touched on those earlier, and there are a lot of resources online about SMART objectives. Clever solutions. This is not the time to be shy. So go ahead. If you came up with a really clever solution, if you've had an obstacle that you worked around, maybe you lost a team member in the middle of the project, or your company decided to change course in the middle of the project. How did you get around that? Let us know. Share that with us. That brings life to your entry. That shows us how well you think, and that will make you score higher. Aligning measurement to your SMART objectives. I think we've definitely touched on that quite a bit. But again, make sure they line up. Once you do set those SMART objectives, make sure your measurement tracks to that. Think about who you're writing for. And again, because on the other end, I know when I entered, I was a little bit unclear on that. So you're writing for evaluators who are all experienced communication professionals who have done this for a long time, who are all trained in evaluation. So they are going to spend time with you. They do this as a volunteer. We actually have a waiting list. We have so many people who want to do this, which is great. People want to get back to the profession. And they're going to give you fair hearing. They want to see your great work. But if you follow the directions, and if you, more importantly, remember that this is a smart communication professional, but someone who doesn't necessarily know your country or your industry. Walk them through it. Talk them through it. Use the framework to tell your story. There are great stories out there. We're all doing remarkable work. Tell us how you did it and how your campaign sang. And even though we said 10, we're going to cheat and give you an 11th, which is get a mentor and proofreaders. Have someone else read it. It's hard when you're so close to your work. There's a lot to absorb with the Gold Quill framework. So get someone to proofread it. In terms of mentors, reach out. You can use often if you're an IBC member, talk to your chapter, get in touch with your region, see if they have any kind of programs. any past winners. Maybe you work with a past winner or know one. People are usually will help you, they'll help pay it forward. Or reach out through the IABC LinkedIn group if you're looking for somebody, or through the lab, the hub. Don't go it alone if you don't have to. There are people who've done this a lot. And I found that the Gold Quill community is generous. You know, one good thing to remember is you're not competing against each other. You're competing against a 7-point scale. We don't have a target for the number of awards we give out. We love giving out awards, but we won't stint with our standards. They are high. So we share the rubrics. We use the scale. And if you get above a 5.25 or a 5.75, you're going to get an award. So think of it that way. We're in together. We're all seeking excellence. I'll pause here for any questions.
So we have a question. If we have a project or a campaign that involves employee feedback that is confidential, or any other confidential information for that matter, we've talked about budget, but other confidential information, how do we handle that? Would that impact our entry if the feedback is not included?
That's tough. I think it would really come down to, can you measure it? Can you share enough measurement? Or could you use buckets? Could you talk about the areas that you get employee feedback about without sharing specific quotes? You know, could you include it in a way that wouldn't compromise your business interests? It's a lot about, can you measure it, and can you provide convincing measurement? And if you can't share the exact feedback, could you share something general enough to help us evaluate your entry? That's another one I would welcome more questions, follow up the recognition at IABC.com or a Twitter direct message, because we might need to talk that through in the specifics. We want to make sure you can provide enough to do a good entry, but we do respect the needs for confidentiality.
And one more question that I can actually take. We get this every year. How many applications do you get each year? And is one category more popular than another? We get between 600 and 700 entries a year across all the different categories. I would say that there are two categories that are probably the most popular: internal communication in Division 1, Category 1, and then also the events, the special events category. Actually, we're calling it experiential events. In Division 4 is also very popular, because oftentimes you'll have a campaign and there'll be an event as a part of it. So you can submit your campaign in one of the Division 1, 2, or 3 categories, and then submit an entry based on that event in the skills category. So that's the answer to that question. But keep in mind, you're not being evaluated against other entries. You are being evaluated against the objective rubrics. So the number of entries, don't be intimidated by that. Enter away. This is not a comparison. It's an objective evaluation.
Awesome. We just have a couple more slides. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour. So you do have the gq.ibc.com to open. I actually should have updated this first bullet, because the entries are open. The portal is open for entries. We have an early bird coming up quickly on October 15th, but then the other deadlines are January 9th, and the late deadline is January 23rd. The prices do go up. The late deadline has the highest fee, so if you're fee conscious, try to get in by January 9th. It does make a difference. Again, you'll be including for communication management, and I should also say training and research, include the work plan and work sample. For skills, it's the entry form and the work sample. You do it all online, and you pay the fee also online. And for questions, I think I've been emphasizing this all through the presentation, but we want questions. That's a big focus for us this year. That's why we're starting so early with this webinar. We want to hear from you. We have a lot of resources out there, but we know it's a lot to navigate. We're here to help. So gq.ibc.com, I would bookmark that. We're going to find a lot of great stuff. That's where you'll also enter. For the Couch to Gold Quill training series you mentioned, go to the IABC LinkedIn group, which is open to all, or to visit the hub, which is an IABC member benefit. Our email is recognition@ibc.com, and then Michelle or I or one of our community members can answer. You can also go ahead and reach out to me at Twitter, Ed Cameron, and our hashtag is IABCGQ. With that, I know we have just 4 minutes left, but any final questions, feedback?
We don't have any other questions in the queue, so last call for any questions that any of you might have. And again, if you aren't sure about the exact nature of your question right now, you can always email us after the fact or go on to the LinkedIn group or the Hub group and ask your question there.
If we don't have any questions now, I do want to say good luck. We want you to win. We want to help you succeed. Reach out, keep the conversation going, and hope to see you at the awards gala in Chicago in June.